Welcome back to another episode of Health is Wealth. And thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. And as always, I am beyond grateful and thankful from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you who is tuning into today's episode. As every week, I'm sharing a new episode, just sharing hopes of words of inspiration and motivation to hopefully bring value into your world. And so thank you again for being here. And what I wanted to talk to you about today briefly is one of the best advices you might hear that I often think about is the advice of taking advice from people who are where you want to be at in life. And I think it's a really great advice because a lot of times, we could take advice from the wrong people. And it's not to say that there's wrong intentions behind people who want to give you advice, whether it's family, friends, people who maybe have an idea of the thing that, you're seeking advice from, or not even seeking, but, things that you want to do, right? And so I think this idea of taking advice from people who are already there is a good one because they're really the only ones who are going to know what it takes to get to a place of where you want to be at, right? Let's say you want to succeed in a certain thing in life. You're not going to really, want to take advice from someone who isn't there or who doesn't know how to get there. And it's not, again, to say that somebody couldn't have an idea. But the more I realize, the more I see this, the more I think, that person who is already there is going to be the person who knows the most about what it's going to take. Only someone who's walked the path, who's been on the journey, who's gotten to that destination can tell you exactly how to get there. Now, even though there might be people who want to help and give good advice, I don't think, I think we should just caution ourselves really, right? As to the advice from other people, if you wanted to be very successful and make a lot of money, you probably wouldn't take advice from someone who's never been successful or made a lot of money. If you want to learn how to become healthier, get skinny, build muscle, right? You necessarily wouldn't take advice from someone who hasn't done there or been there themselves, and so forth and so forth. And again, it's not to say that people offering help or advice don't have any clue on what they could be talking about. But I think the person who's ultimately always going to be most qualified to do so is anybody who's in the position of where you want to be. You want to learn this skill and be that person and go down that career path, then whoever that person is who's already done it, who's already been there and is there, should be the only person you should actually take advice to, even if you have other people saying, well, this is what I would do, or this is probably best for that. And so for myself, I'm always thinking about this, and I always try to remind myself, even if there are people trying to be helpful, even, because you're going to find advice anywhere, right? From people who are close, from people online, people just around, right? And it's not necessarily that you have to be actively asking for it, but a lot of times when we're trying to figure out something to achieve a certain thing, accomplish something, oftentimes we're paying attention to somebody, right? Or something, getting that information on how to go about the thing we're trying to achieve. And so again, I think it's best that we're always just aware of these things, because for me, again, there's certain areas of things that I want to do and directions of life that I want to go in. And so I ultimately want to take that advice from somebody who's been there, right? I've got so many big goals and dreams and aspirations of becoming an entrepreneur, of becoming a millionaire, of becoming very successful. And so I take a lot of the advice that, could help me get to those positions from those who are already there, someone who's living that life, somebody who's walked that path, somebody who knows what they're talking about and doing. And again, it's not to say that people who aren't there maybe not wouldn't have an idea, but you're not going to get any better advice than someone who's been down that road specifically. And so for me, again, I'm always just doing my best to be cautious of the advice that I take, and I'm always open up to it from anybody for sure. I just remind myself of where the source is coming from, and not to say I don't consider a lot of different things, but I know the advice I consider the most is someone who's exactly where it is that I want to be at, doing exactly what it is that I want to do, because obviously getting from here to there, they will probably know a thing or two about what it takes to get there. So this message here today is about that, right? Always be sure of where you're getting your advice of. Always make sure to do the best, that you're taking advice from people who are in a position of where you want to be in, because it's going to be the most effective advice for someone who's already walked that path, who's gone down the journey, who's gotten to that destination, gotten the results of the same thing you're looking to get results out of. And that's just something I do, all the time. Just always think about, the advice that I'm taking. That's why I think, again, it's probably one of the best advice there is, right? Because, to take advice from someone who's not in the thing that you want to do or heading down the area that you want to head down, it's hard to say that there is valid information, because it's what is that advice really based off of, right? Somebody could tell you, hey, this is not a good business idea. That's not going to be a good way to make that money. That's never going to work out. But if they've never done it, if they've never walked a path, if they've never gone the journey, if they've never achieved it, then how can we really validate that they know what they're talking about? How would you know? You haven't done it, And so just always be aware of the advice that you're taking, and always take advice from someone who is in the position of where you want to be. And that's something I always try to lead with everything that I am trying to do, even though, again, I will listen to advice and opinions from others and stuff like that. But most importantly, I take and look at the advice from someone who's exactly where I want to be and get to in life. So as always, I appreciate you guys for being here, and we will see you on the next one.